How's it going, everyone? My name is Rinzler here, back again for another video, and welcome to my review of The Amazing Spider-Man 2, my yay, nay, or okay review. For newcomers of the channel, I rate movies on a yay, nay, or okay scale, which is just a more general review style. Basically, if I like a movie, I'll give it a yay. If I hated it, I'll give it a nay. And if I thought it was fine, I'll give it an okay. Simple as that. This is my fifth Spider-Man review. I have reviewed all three Raimi movies and the first Amazing Spider-Man. So if you haven't already, please check those out if you can. And yes, I did get new glasses. If you were gonna ask about that. But anyway, not the point. So The Amazing Spider-Man 2 released in 2014. It was directed by the very ironically named Mark Webb, and once again stars Andrew Garfield and Emma Stone. But it does introduce some new characters this time around, including Harry Osborn, played by Dane DeHaan, and Jamie Foxx as Electro. Um, Also, Paul Giamatti is the Rhino, and I almost forgot about him because the movie kind of forgets about him. Okay, so let's get into my review of TASM 2. Honestly, if it wasn't for like Spider-Man's adjacent spin-off films like Madam Web and Morbius, I truly do believe The Amazing Spider-Man 2 would be the worst Spider-Man movie for sure. Although I have softened on this movie. I've had kind of a roller coaster ride with TASM 2 actually. Uh, so this movie came out in 2014. I was 12, about to turn 13 when this movie first came out. And I was actually riding a Marvel hype because this came out not long after Captain America: The Winter Soldier, which is actually my favorite MCU movie, if you were wondering. And it came out right before X-Men: Days of Future Past, which is my favorite X-Men movie that isn't Logan or Deadpool. Um, and yeah, and then Guardians of the Galaxy came out later that year and was really good too. So 2014 as a whole was a very good year for Marvel, quality wise, and also even Big Hero 6 is a Marvel movie as well, if you didn't know that. So the Amazing Spider-Man 2 is like this weird outlier almost, like the only Marvel movie in 2014 that no one could universally agree was at least good. But I have softened on it because when this movie first came out, I actually didn't think it was bad. I actually didn't mind The Amazing Spider-Man 2 when it first came out. And then 2 years later, I saw it again in school. It was like the last day of my freshman year of high school. The teacher didn't feel like giving out a lesson, so she just put on The Amazing Spider-Man 2. And I remember thinking, damn, I liked this. Like, I had a much different reaction to it the second time around. And I thought it was kind of cringe, honestly. Um, and then years later, I saw a Cosmonaut Variety Hours review of those movies. And if I'm not mistaken, he really didn't like TASM 2. And that kind of made me rethink the movie. And so then I was doing the what ifs, so I rewatched it so I could talk about it. And I expected to really hate it. And I do dislike this movie in a lot of ways, but I have come to respect it more as the years have gone on. Time is, in general has been very kind to the Andrew Garfield duology. A lot of that is because Andrew Garfield redeemed his take on the character in No Way Home, to the point that people are like begging Sony and Marvel to somehow do Amazing Spider-Man 3, which I do hope they do. I honestly would rather have Amazing Spider-Man 3 than a Tobey Spider-Man 4, which I know is kind of a hot take. But at this point, I would be fine if Toby didn't do any more solo movies. I think Andrew is the one who really needs one at this point, because at least Toby got a trilogy, right? But anyway, not the point. So going in, I will say a big criticism I have for TASM 2 right off the bat is it's very unfocused. There's so much going on in this movie. And longtime viewers of the channel will know why that is. A lot of that has to do with the fact that this movie is a setup movie. Or a trailer movie. I like to call these trailer movies. Movies that are not made with the actual film that we're watching in mind. It's just a film used to set up other films. And I actually made a ton of videos in late 2021, and then eventually one really long video where I just talked about all these canceled Amazing Spider-Man projects. Like we were gonna get an interquel set between one and two. We were also gonna get we were gonna get a direct sequel to two, where Gwen was actually gonna come back to life via the Carnage symbiote, actually. And Peter would have to like put her out of her misery. And so there was that, and there was also going to be two Spider-Man 2099 movies. There was going to be a multiverse movie where Andrew and Toby's Peters would fight each other. There was going to be a Black Cat movie with Felicity Jones, where Kurt Russell was actually going to play her dad, supposedly. Like there was a lot of projects, like Jesus, because they were planning on doing an entire cinematic universe of Amazing Spider-Man projects, and TASM 2 was just supposed to be the start. And obviously they were going to do a Sinister Six movie, and they were going to do a Savage Land project, supposedly. Like, there were so many things. Um, and it's very obvious to me when you watch this movie knowing everything they had planned, it becomes very obvious because this movie has just so much going on. Like there's the stuff with Peter's guilt, and constantly breaking up and getting back together with Gwen. But then there's also like Aunt May, uh, like trying to be a nurse. There's all this stuff with Electro. There's the stuff with Harry. There's the stuff like there's the mystery with Peter's parents. Like there's so much going on in this movie. There was stuff with the Daily Bugle, although not enough. Like, unfortunately, we didn't get to see J. Jonah Jameson in either of the TASM movies. Although J.K. Simmons was going to come back as J. Jonah Jameson in these films as well. Unfortunately, he didn't, which is disappointing. Um, but yeah, there's just a lot going on in this movie. Too much. And I mentioned in my review of the first movie, I thought it was a mistake to kill Captain Stacy at the end of the first film because I kind of wanted them to build that up more. Like, I in general, I want them to build up Peter and Gwen more as a couple, even though they have great chemistry. I kind of thought it was a mistake for her to know he's Spider-Man in movie one, because then it's like, oh, like here's the guilt, I shouldn't be putting you in this, but then they have to do that in the second film, which I think kind of made them feel obligated to kill her off in the second film, so that it's like his guilt becomes a reality and it's going to eat away at him in future films. I think it could have been structured better. I kind of wish they had done um Gwen maybe not dying until TASM 3. I feel like they could have stretched that out longer. And Sony seemingly agreed that it was a mistake to kill her so soon because they were actually going to do an interquel called The Amazing Spider-Man Craven that was going to be between the first two movies, that was actually going to be made simply because they really wanted to do more stuff with Peter and Gwen as a couple. And they also wanted to bridge the gap between films. Like they wanted to show why he goes from having like a homemade suit to having a really professionally made looking suit. Um, Speaking of which, that is one thing everyone seems to agree is great about TASM 2 is the suit. And I have to say that until Tom Holland's newest suit, this was the best live action Spider-Man suit by far for me. And this suit might still be better than Tom Holland's for me. I'm not sure. I have to see the new Tom Holland suit in action more. As of recording, Brand New Day hasn't come out yet. We're still a few months away from that. Or is it's like 6 or 7 months away, however long it is. Like it's sometime in the summer, and recording this in January 2026, so we're still a long way away from Brand New Day. So I haven't really gotten to see the new suit in action. So for now, anyway, I still feel confident saying that the TASM 2 suit is my favorite. Even though I didn't hate the TASM 1 suit, I defended the TASM 1 suit, but I do admit the TASM 2 suit is a lot better. It's even better than the Tobey Maguire suit. Like, it's very good. The only thing that would have made it better is if the eyes moved, but I get why they didn't do that. This is before the Deadpool movies proved that you could have the moving white eyes and it wouldn't look like shit in live action. But I still think it's great, even though the eyes don't move. Now, I do have a hot take, a very big hot take about TASM 2 that no one, I mean no one, is gonna agree with me on this. And that's fine. I think it's fine for me to have a unique opinion, but if you disagree, tell me obviously. But this is just my opinion. I prefer Dane DeHaan as Harry Osborn than James Franco. I actually think Dane DeHaan's better at being Harry Osborn. He is working at a disadvantage because Harry was not introduced in the first Amazing Spider-Man. They chose to save him for the sequel and then retroactively make it so he and Peter were childhood friends. And it does feel very slapped on. But if you can get over that, I actually don't think he's a bad Harry Osborn. Um, I think his acting feels better in a lot of ways than James Franco, whose performance was a lot more muted at times for me, very wooden. I said in my reviews of those movies. Whereas Dane DeHaan, I feel he brings more emotion to the role, and in that regard, I actually like him more. Maybe that's just me. Like to be honest with you, I kind of wanted them to bring Dane DeHaan's Harry back in No Way Home because I think it would have been so interesting to see Peter being forced to confront the person who killed Gwen, like this person that used to be his best friend, and has now killed the woman he loved and broken him as a hero. Like even by No Way Home, it seems like he hasn't fully gotten over it yet. So it affects him for many years. I think it would have been really interesting if he was forced to relive that by actually, because like the whole point of No Way Home was trying to fix and cure the villains. Imagine that Peter being forced to try and fix, the Harry Osborn that killed the woman he loves. Like, just imagine that, right? Like, I actually think it was a missed opportunity not to do that. If I ever do what ifs again, I would love to do a what if about Dane DeHaan's Harry being in No Way Home. Let me know in the comments if you would love to see that because I would love to do that scenario one day because I think it would have been really cool. But regardless, yeah, I think Dane DeHaan's not a bad Harry Osborn. Andrew Garfield, I think, is really good in TASM 2, and he was very good in TASM 1. He's really good in TASM 2. Gwen's death scene, low key, is one of the best superhero movie scenes ever, in my opinion. At least from an acting standpoint, because the buildup is not the best. I think Harry's transformation into the Goblin and subsequent murder of Gwen was not handled the best. It could have been built up better, absolutely. But her actual death scene, the slow motion stuff with like the web looking like a hand reaching out for her, and then her dying, not because of the fall necessarily, but more the fact that he gets her but too late. Like the web sticks to her, but she's too close to the floor, and it's too late. And she bangs off the floor, and Peter feels like it's his fault because if he had just been like a second earlier, then he would have saved her, you know so I actually think her death scene's really well done in that way. And then his reaction to it, my God, his crying scene is insanely good. And I said Tobey Maguire's crying was really good. Andrew Garfield's crying is like on a whole other level of good for me. It's genuinely one of the saddest scenes I've ever seen in a movie. I have yet to see any reactors online who are seeing this movie for the first time not tear up watching that scene. It's just hard to watch. You really feel every ounce of Peter's pain in that scene. And it just makes it all the more frustrating to me that we never got TASM 3. Because hate or love TASM 2, the fact that for years that was what we left off on with him, just it felt awful. Like it felt just genuinely awful. I actually kind of wish in some ways they just kept Andrew for the MCU and not rebooted because I think it would have been so interesting to see him kind of joining the Avengers after Gwen's death, and the Avengers are kind of his way of coping. I think that would have been such an interesting direction to go. And I think at first they were just going to have Andrew come back, and then they decided to reboot because they wanted to do Peter in high school more than the previous versions, which I'm fine with. But it would have been really interesting, to see a Peter join the Avengers when he's grieving for a loved one. I just think that would have been so interesting. Um, so yeah, so I quite like Dane DeHaan as Harry. I think he's underrated. Gwen's death scene's fantastic. Andrew's performance in this whole movie is actually very good in my opinion. He's not given the best material to work with, but he's giving it his all. And him and Emma Stone have fantastic chemistry once again. Their chemistry is so good, it almost doesn't bother me that they break up and get back together again so much. It does bother me, but their performance is so good it almost works still. It's that good for me. Sally Field's Aunt May is not in this movie as much, but what she does in this movie, I think, is still very good. Even though she doesn't have any scenes nearly as emotional. Aside from this one scene, I will admit, where she sees that Peter has been looking into his parents, and she basically like cries because she worries that like he doesn't love her anymore. Like that's actually a really well done scene, very underrated scene. Let's see other things. Jamie Foxx's Electro. Um, I don't care for him. Like I get what they're trying to go for, but I do think his Electro, even though even if he is different than the comics, even like aside from that, I do find his interpretation quite redundant in a lot of ways because he's just another. Okay, let me explain. Let me go back. Starting in 1992, superhero movies started this trope of like the nerdy or ugly character that like has that develops a reason to like hate the hero and gets like this villainous, glamorous makeover and then try to kill them or get revenge on them somehow. That started in 1992, as far as I know, with Michelle Pfeiffer's Catwoman, and it really worked with Michelle Pfeiffer's Catwoman. So then they tried to do it again with Jim Carrey as the Riddler, and then they did it again with Uma Thurman as Poison Ivy, and then again with Halle Berry's Catwoman, and then again with Guy Pearce as Aldrich Killian in Iron Man 3, and then years later they did it again with Kristen Wiig as Cheetah in Wonder Woman 1984. It's like this trope that just won't stop. It just keeps happening over and over and over again. And it happens here too with Jamie Foxx's Electro. His Max Dillon is like this nerdy guy obsessed with Spider-Man. And deleted scenes actually show that he was also living with his sick mother, who's regularly mean to him, which I wish they kept in because it does make him like a little bit more unique in that regard. Because I don't think any of the ones I just said had any kind of parental figure. So that would have made his version more unique. But regardless, I don't think Jamie Foxx is bad in what he's doing, but I do not like the direction they go. I think it's quite redundant, and I don't think he has enough of a reason to hate Spider-Man. Just honestly, because all of it just comes off very petty to me. I don't know. Sometimes like my mind changes on that a lot. Sometimes I think it works, but other times I think it's just kind of dumb. Like I can never like this movie is probably the hardest for me to review because there's so many things I kind of like even though I know they're bad. You know what I mean? Like I don't fully like his performance, but I also kind of do. Like sometimes it works for me. But overall I don't really care for his Electro. I think he's better in No Way Home, but not by much. He's not in it as much as like Green Goblin or Doc Ock, but he's better in No Way Home. I think they use him better in that. And I don't have a problem with the race swapping. In general, I try to be open minded about race swapping. And I had no real connection to Electro as a character, so it didn't really bother me or anything. And Jamie Foxx is a fantastic actor. Like I've seen him in Collateral, and he's fantastic in Collateral. So like I know the dude can act, and I do think he was giving everything he could with the role of Electro. It just wasn't really working out. Paul Giamatti is the Rhino. He's barely in it, but he's pretty terrible. Yeah, his Russian accent is crap. And he's just too goofy to take seriously, honestly. Like he feels like something that should have been in like the Raimi movies, honestly. He doesn't really fit with the web movies. At least in my head. Even in the Raimi movies, I think he would have been too over the top. But yeah, I don't know. So yeah, this movie just has a lot of problems, and there's some just weird plot holes. Like they don't really give a good reason why Peter doesn't want to help Harry with his blood. It's like if Harry's gonna die anyway, then who cares? You know what I mean? Just at least take the risk. And to be fair, the interquel I said that was gonna be between 1 and 2, they were going to explain why Peter is so reluctant, because they were going to have it so that like Norman, who's dying, gets a hold of Peter's blood, and it ends up turning him into a giant goblin monster, like an Ultimate Spider-Man. And then he goes back to being human, but it's accelerated his disease to the point he's about to die. Which then would explain why Peter doesn't want to give his blood to Harry and TASM 2. But we don't get that movie. So in the actual movie, it doesn't really make sense. It just comes off like Peter is being kind of unreasonable. And I feel like Harry has a understandable reason to be a little upset with him. At least that's how I feel. Although, like, this is all based on the goblin disease, like the Osborn family curse, which I think is just a dumb story in general. Like, why is there just this random goblin disease that only affects the Osborn family? And why is it that Harry is so far along with it when his dad survived all the way into being old before it got really bad for him? Like, why is it different with Harry? It doesn't really make any sense. And like they kind of try to build something with him and Felicia, but like a lot of their scenes together were cut out. Like there's a lead scene where she actually sees his immediate transformation, and he actually tells her to leave because he doesn't want to hurt her. And I wish they kept that in. Like I just feel like there's a lot of scenes that probably shouldn't have been deleted, but yeah, because there's actually a lot that was cut from this already very busy film. Like Mary Jane Watson was going to be in this movie, and she was completely cut out. She was going to be played by Shailene Woodley, or Triss from Divergent. But yeah, and she was cut out. They were going to bring her back for TASM 3, but they never ended up doing TASM 3. But yeah, so I just have very mixed feelings on TASM 2 as a whole. It's very weirdly paced. Uh, Unlike other Spider-Man movies where I feel like it's pretty well paced and not always boring, the TASM movies are not as good at the pacing. I said TASM 1 was slow at times. TASM 2 is worse because it keeps flipping between different plots that don't always feel like they have anything to do with each other. And the Peter Parker parents mystery stuff, I already said I didn't like it in TASM 1. I hate it in TASM 2. Like it's full on insufferable in TASM 2 because it's in TASM 1 it was like barely touched on, but in TASM 2 they go over it over and over and over again. They dedicate the entire opening to this like plane crash scene that feels more like a James Bond movie than a Spider-Man movie. And I like James Bond, but it just feels so out of place in a Spider-Man film. And I already didn't like it in TASM 1, so I really hate it in TASM 2. Um, and it just doesn't feel like it really affects anything because, anyone that really knew Peter's parents are like not really a factor really anymore, aside from uh, like the dude with the hat, Fears, I think his name was, that was at the end. I think he was gonna factor more in with that. But the actor died and then they didn't make TASM 3, so it doesn't matter. And the lizard doesn't come back. I feel like maybe they could have gotten Reese Ifans back, as someone Peter could have talked to about his parents. That would have been a cool way to bring it back to TASM 1. Um, but yeah, I don't know. I feel like that the stuff with Peter's parents just is so out of place and really didn't need to be in the story. And yeah, Peter and Gwen's relationship problems, I don't know. It's very off and on. It's not consistent. They're always breaking up and getting back together again, and like Peter keeps changing his mind on whether it's okay. And Gwen understandably gets kind of annoyed with him, and I feel annoyed on her behalf. Like, make up your damn mind, Peter. And yeah, I do think they made it too obvious Gwen was going to die as well, because they say she's going to go to Oxford, and it's like, well, obviously he's not going to go to Oxford. They're not going to do a Spider-Man movie that's not in New York. Well, they ended up doing that eventually with Far From Home, but at the time, like everyone knew they weren't going to do that. So it just made it very obvious to me Gwen was going to die. Even though the actual scene was well executed, it wasn't built up very well, and it was made way too obvious, in my opinion, that she was going to die. Even if you haven't read the comics, you know, But yeah, and like Electro is kind of built up as the main villain at first, but then it shifts to Harry, and Electro just kind of becomes a secondary villain, but Harry doesn't feel built up enough to be the main villain either. So this movie has like a kind of villain identity crisis where it can't decide who it wants the main villain to be. The marketing all makes it out like it's Electro, but a lot of the time it feels more like it's Harry. But Harry doesn't feel built up, so it's this weird thing. And a lot of the trailers made the Rhino out like he was going to be a bigger part of the movie than he is. He's barely in it, and he's only in the Rhino suit at the very end. In a really weird scene where all these people are like kind of gathered around like it's a show and not like a crisis. Like I'd be running the hell away if I saw that. I wouldn't be standing around. Um, it's just odd to me. I do really like the scene earlier in the film where Peter repairs the little boy's like science project that the bullies destroyed. That scene apparently was going to get cut out. Andrew Garfield fought to keep it in, and I'm really glad he did. It's one of the best scenes in the movie. Um, so yeah, overall, oh, I want to mention the Hans Zimmer score. I mentioned in my TASM 1 review, I don't like it as much as James Horner's score. I still prefer James Horner's score, but Hans Zimmer's score is still very, very good. I very much love his theme. And yeah, I actually think it's quite good. I think in No Way Home, they actually had James Horner and Hans Zimmer's themes, if I'm not mistaken, or maybe it was just James Horner's. Whatever it was, I really liked what they did with that there. But yeah, Hans Zimmer's theme is quite good. I don't like it as much as Horner's, but it's still very very good. Um, yeah, so overall, this movie does get a lot right. Strong score, great suit. Visually, this movie is stunning. Like, there's really good shots. 'Cause they get rid of the grounded, dark stuff from the first movie and try to go bigger and more colorful with it. And it really works. Visually, this movie is absolutely stunning, even if I don't love the character designs of Harry as Green Goblin or Electro. I still think from a coloring and special effects standpoint, this movie is beautiful. Like you can tell they really put effort in how this movie looks. But yeah, and the action scenes are all fantastic in this movie as well. And there's a really funny montage of him being Spider-Man and like being sick as Spider-Man and stuff like that. And I love that too. And Andrew Garfield's acting is great, and the chemistry between Peter and Gwen is really good, even if it's too off and on for my liking. And her death scene is very tragic. Dane DeHaan for me is a step up from James Franco. So, like this movie has a lot going for it. It really does. I just think it's lost because it has too much going on. It's trying so hard to set up other movies that we never even get, which just means that it suffers as a film on its own, which I think is unfortunate because I think the vision is there. There's a good movie in here somewhere. It's just lost in the midst of all this stuff the studio is trying to build up to. Some things just feel rushed. Harry's descent into Green Goblin feels rushed. Gwen's death feels rushed and not quite earned. And yeah, there's just too much going on. It's a very unfocused film. It doesn't always know what it wants to be. It's just trying to set up other things, and it can't decide who it wants the villain to be. It can't decide what it wants Peter's main struggle in the movie to be. It's constantly changing what his personal obstacle is. Like, I don't know. It's a very confused film. Um, and at times it can be unintentionally cringe. Yeah, I don't know. I just don't always know what to make of TASM 2. I respect what it's trying to do. I think it gets a lot right. And I think it does get overhated, but I do still think fundamentally and structurally, it is probably the worst mainline Spider-Man film. I do enjoy watching Spider-Man 3 more, even though I think TASM 2 has a lot going for it. So ultimately, I am going to give The Amazing Spider-Man 2 a nay. But I think it has enough good in it that it's a high nay. Like it's a good enough nay that I would still recommend watching it, but go in expecting it to be the worst mainline Spider-Man film. Whether that be live action or animated, this is definitely the weakest one that we've had so far. Not counting the Nicholas Hammond movies from the 70s and 80s, because that was just episodes of his show compiled together, so I don't really count those. But yeah, so I'm gonna give The Amazing Spider-Man 2 a nay, even though I do actually think that people are hard on it a little bit. But anyway, if I forgot to mention anything, make sure to let me know in the comments down below, and I will try to address them there. And if you did enjoy this video, remember to give it a thumbs up and share this video with all your friends and all your various social media platforms. And I will see all of you in the next video.